about, or when it's talked about liberation, I take it that is referring to the mind.
No. Liberation refers to the inherent quality of what this is. This is liberated because it's based on nothing and has absolutely no repercussions whatsoever. No obligations, no entrapments. It instantaneously happens and then disappears continually with no repercussions is a good word. And that's what liberation means. And when you notice that fact, then you discover that any repercussions and history and obligations that you may have imagined previously are solely imaginary and not based in actuality. Which is why that discovery, from a personal point of view, can be said to be liberating. But liberation is the inherent quality of what this is. It's like a dream. A dream is liberated because there's absolutely no implications. It's just the instantaneous event itself, and that event is entirely transcendental in the sense that you can't pin it down. You can't say what it is even as it's happening, let alone after it's happened.
Isn't that the same as attachment to the mind?
What, sorry?
Isn't that the same as attachment to the mind? Liberation is freedom from attachment to the mind.
Well, yeah, it's freedom from believing your interpretations. Sure, yeah.
So I was looking and feeling and experiencing thought as opposed to, let's say, reality. Now, thoughts are reality because they're happening, but they're also happening with like emotion, with the physical response in the body, and I mean we call it fantasy, but it seems like be very hard pressed to show the difference between thought and reality.
No, all that is real. What's not real is the correspondence, the cross-correlation. Sure, there are physical phenomena, sure there's emotional phenomena, sure there's mental phenomena, but they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. It's all synchronistic coincidence that instantaneously appears and disappears with no traces. So all phenomena on any level, so to speak, are autonomous. They only exist in themselves, and any correlation with other phenomena on other levels, so to speak, is strictly coincidental. And that's the fallacy of thought. It claims that something can be about something can be related to something, a thought can be related to a material event, or past can be related to a future, or cause can be related to effect. And all that is just simply not true. It doesn't work like that.
It's just itself.
Yes, exactly. It's just itself in real time. Everything is just itself in real time, and nothing is connected with anything else other than itself in real time. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's the actuality.
Yeah.
And then thought mucks that up by supposing all sorts of cross-correlations and interrelationships that are unnecessary complications. They don't actually exist as such. They're imputations, they're arguments, they could be claimed that they might exist, they're hypotheses, but they don't in actuality, as it turns out. Very much like in a dream, the dream might seem to have different events happening, and you might seem to have different interpretations in the dream, and you might be thinking, and you might have emotional reactions to things, and you might have, sort of analogous to physical sensations and experiences and things, and they can all seem to be cross-correlated in terms of an elaborate plot line and interrelationship, and the monster's chasing me, and And I'm really scared, and I'm running away, and I'm getting tired because I'm running so hard, and he's going to find me, and oh my God, he's getting hold of me and biting me, and oh, it hurts. So all of that cross-correlation that narration generates is complete fabrication. It's not actual. Because the actuality is just the instantaneous flash of the apparition of the dream phenomenon, which is connected with nothing whatsoever other than that flash. Right, you see what I mean? Which can show up on many, many levels of qualitative, call it textures or flavors. See what I mean? So, at any given instant in the dream, the monster's about to bite down on your arm and you're trying to get away, and all that interpretation, just that little slice of a time frame of the event is just this flash of patterning of transcendental energies appearing in experience. And all of the storyline about the monster and the running away and all of that is just a hypothesis. It's connecting the dots in imagination. And the dots aren't connected. That's really the crux of it. The dots are not connected. It's that simple. So whenever you connect the dots in your imagination, it's value added. You're adding fabrication to something that doesn't exist. The dots exist. The dots exist. They're real. All qualitative textures actually exist. Thought exists. Emotion exists. Physical sensation exists, etc., etc., etc. But it has nothing to do with anything other than itself in the immediate instant.
The dots being like the infinite variety of possibilities.
Well, not of possibilities, of actualities.
Oh, well, okay.
I mean, actual energy events in experience. Like, you see a flash of red, or you hear a certain sound, or, a certain thought texture appears, or something. Those are actualities.
And whether there's the engagement is dependent upon.
Well, engagement, but again, engagement is kind of a slippery thing. If they're present, there's engagement. If there's experience, there's engagement of experiencing.
Right.
But there's no. But the what comes up that works is interpretation, i.e., having a storyline, having a theory about what's happening in any sort of a way that does connect the dots. It does say, oh, there's this flash of red and that sound and this thing, and so that means that I'm in an environment and such is happening. And that's not true. The energies are present, but they're actually not connected to anything except that they're instantaneous flashing. I mean, in practice, it's a lot more subtle than that. To put the essence of it, that's the approach. Actually, every flash of energy has to do with every other flash of energy, and they're cross-connected in inconceivable ways. They're actually identical. They're on the same. There's only one flash of energy, and it looks like all of this. But that's irrelevant. That's beside the point. It's not helpful to notice that, and that becomes quite apparent once you let go of getting caught up in all of these interpretations. But for practical purposes, treating it as if it's all just completely disconnected and has only to do with itself and its own instantaneous being, each energy event is sufficient.
So the question arises when you speak and one word follows another, you're leaving a sense of meaning. How does meaning come out of that sequence?
The only actual meaning is the energy event itself. And if there's true meaning, the meaning is that energy event itself, which in this case is the pretension. If I was telling a story about what happened to me in my childhood, that would be a much more elaborate, and the meaning would be basically a fantasy. It would be non-existent as such, because the actual meaning is the energy event occurring in real time. I don't know if I put that very clearly.
Otherwise, we're creating story about artifacts, essentially.
Yeah. The only actual meaning is, the only powerful meaning, the only actual meaning is the energy of Anasalta Shakti. And the elaborations and all of that are noise in the system that don't actually, that sort of are, closer misinterpretations of the meaning, which is, of course, the energy in itself.
Is that why certain statements by, say, the scriptures or a great soul speaks, that has more power than just an ordinary person who's thinking in terms of sequences and conclusions?
Yeah, because in that instance, cross-correlation is used to cut through itself. The elaboration of semantic implication is being used to undermine itself and get back to the... So you're departing from the simple purity to go back to it very directly, rather than departing through it a very elaborate, maze of confusion.
That's where I was just now trying to find this place. I was not elaborate. I was trying to cut through it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, the only powerful meaning is actuality. And this is true for everyone at all times, which is why people find life so unsatisfying. Because they look for meaning through their elaborations, through whatever sort of statuses you try and find or generate in your life, certain living conditions or certain social statuses of various degrees and all of that, and we expect these things to be meaningful. And they always
let you down.
They always let you down. They never quite deliver the goods. Because you're looking for love in all the wrong places, sort of metaphorically, but the only thing that actually satisfies is the actuality of energy, which of course is omnipresent. But if you're qualifying it in terms of elaborate abstractions, you're not letting yourself access it. You're not letting yourself. It's like having a lot of food and not eating it.
But some part of me must be catching that.
Oh yeah, of course, because you always are actually engaged with that. So it's a funny game of sort of engagement and not acknowledging the engagement. Whereas letting go into the simplicity of the fact of experience is the finish line, not what you're experiencing and how you're experiencing and trying to manipulate the experience to improve it and all this other stuff. Doesn't do anything. It doesn't add. There's no actual value added there. The real value is the experience itself. That's the finish line. The fact of experience.
But that fact is completely indescribable around.
Oh, entirely.
Although it's very knowable, it's not. You're not able to define it.
Entirely, yeah. But you don't need to. And that's the problem in a certain sense is we keep trying to define it in terms of trying to define it conditionally, in terms of various, again, material statuses or social statuses or more sort of heroic, weird neurotic statuses or whatever. But instead of just, this transcendent presence is the goal, is the prize, and it's already right here, what could be easier? But to see that and to access that, you have to have sufficient maturity to let go, to see through your elaborations that you've seduced yourself with.
So really, if there's a spiritual practice, it's primarily negative then.
Well, it's the discovery of that which is positive, of that which is actual, which can be said to be a negativity of abandoning that which is not real.
Yeah.
So you're abandoning unreality.
Yeah, we have to come to terms with what we think is real and leave it behind somehow, or look through it, or stop.
Letting go of interpretation. It's that simple. I think the hardest part of all this is even knowing goal is, because there's so much misinformation. And given that the starting point for most people is seduction into being completely lost in a wild world when they're fed fantastic abstraction, which is based on very, very little. Given that that's the starting point, where do you look? Where's the exit door? Where's the anything?
How do you tackle?
And then you have lots of information floating around, which is saying, oh, this is what's good, that's what's good. Getting rich is what's good. Being young and beautiful is what's good. Having lots of sex is what's good. Memorizing Sanskrit is what's good. This is that. All of this stuff, and it's like, well, okay, that all sounds great. So what do you do? So it's a challenge. So you have to find yourself, or essentially luck into sufficient maturity that you stumble onto the actual, the true information, which is that the prize, the goal, the powerful fact is this present energy. The simple and effortless, spontaneous fact of this present energy. And that seems to be a relatively rare thing in this spiritual dark age we seem to have. Doesn't seem to be being said a lot.
The bias seems to be that all this elaboration is interesting, and if it's just one thing, that's boring.
Right. But of course that's a fallacy, because the one thing is what is interesting. The one thing is the elaboration. Or to put it more powerfully, the elaboration is the one thing, without needing to stop being the elaboration. So you get to take and eat it. But when you take it as it actually is, it's much more satisfying than taking it in terms of your misinterpretations, because then it has a fundamental confusing and unsatisfying aspect.
That's for sure. And that's Buddha saying everything is suffering, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is all Buddha was saying exactly the same thing. Because it's the case. I mean, it's just a fact. And anyone that sees reality is going to essentially be saying the same thing, because it happens to be the case. It happens to be the fact. It can't be put precisely, so there's a lot of different ways it can be put in terms of the specifics of how it's expressed.
I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to say it again, that for me, the way that I understand, if there is any understanding, noticing is really if you can really notice, you're awakened.
Yes.
Because noticing is being. But when I try to notice, I think sometimes I come from it from the other side because I'm putting out an effort to notice that whatever conceptual models that I'm seeing or categorizing or defining, that's not it.
That's fine. Although I would say instead of focusing on the conceptual models, focus on the target of the models, and notice that your experience is not what you think it is. But emphasize the experience rather than what you think it is in terms of where you're looking. I mean, it's a different way of putting the same thing.
Yeah.
But the point is your experience is not what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Period. No matter how elaborate and sophisticated and subtle a conception you have, it cannot capture what this is, because what this is cannot be captured in ideas.
Yeah.
It's intrinsically transcendental.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to get what it is, just get that it is not what you think. That's all. Just, wow, this is not what I think it is. So nothing is what you think it is. This is not a computer, or a computer isn't a computer. This is a computer, but what a computer is not what anything has ever or will ever think it is.
Yeah.
Something entirely other.
Yeah.
These are not people. What people think people are is entirely wrong. What's here is completely different than what anyone has ever or will ever think a person is, and so on and so forth. So just notice that the actual immediate experience, the world of your experience, in any aspect, is completely unimaginable. It's completely weird. It's completely astounding.
And then I guess at some point you're noticing you're being with your experience.
Yeah.
As opposed to
Well, you get because I mean that's one of the things. You are already with your experience.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of letting go of the habit of thinking, of oversimplifying it, of generating these mental models and relating to things as if they were what you think they are.
Or if I generate those, I can still have understand that that's not.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with having models. There's nothing wrong at all. But you just see that they're approximations. They aren't actual. They aren't accurate.
Yeah, because that's kind of what I'm doing now is I just I don't believe anything, or I mean I may believe it, but my objective is to not believe what's going on in my world around.
That's great.
And,
That's excellent.
but I can't say that I'm still not getting invested, but or sometimes really believing. But I mean that seems to be if there is any kind of effort, that seems to be what.
That's great. That's great. There's nothing wrong with having interpretations, and there's nothing wrong with getting sucked up into them. But just notice that there's more than that. Don't let that be the totality of your life, that you let yourself access.
Yeah, I guess it's okay to get sucked in them. Just know that that's not what the experience. That's
Yeah.
not that's not what experience is all about.
Yeah, just to have a concrete awareness that there's more.
Yeah.
Wow, there's something entirely more than that.
Peter, how can you relax or just sort of accept in unfolding, some of the change? I mean, there's been some incredible things, it's mostly related to how I sleep now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sort of equating it to some of the experiences I had when I was taking acid.
Mm-hmm.
I was very young anyway, but I mean, I'm so open anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But, I fell into it most of the time, very easily.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, something would happen that would just be so mind-blowing, that's what they'd call it,
Mm-hmm.
that it would take a while to, I don't know, just to function,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, this is sort of serious stuff that's that's happening. I mean, and I just sort of realize it, and I'll just sort of say, this is so stupid. Why? What's wrong? Why am I getting it? So there's some uptightness involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of symptoms that pop up in unfoldment, and they aren't important in themselves. And the approach is always the same, which is don't worry about them and just go to the energy. Whenever you can, do noticing, go to the energy.
Yeah.
And don't worry about, because all sorts of weird symptoms can show up, physical symptoms and mental symptoms and emotional symptoms and synchronistic events in your outer world and health issues and just all kinds of weird stuff can just show up. One sort of simplistic way of putting it, it's like you get sort of an accelerated karmic working out going on or something. But that's an elaborate story, which is obvious bullshit. But at any rate, it can look like that. It can look like, that, wow, this is weird, what's going on here. But again, just don't worry about what it seems to be, and go to what it is, which will always be radiant present.
Yeah.
Because of course that's what
that sort of starts happening a little bit automatically anyway, because it is sort of a strange energy, or in itself sort of fun or interesting.
Yeah. Well, any of these things, especially if they're unusual, are going to be interesting. Like, wow, that's interesting. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, sort of like like in the seeing all those interesting rock formations and geography so far out. Just never seen something like that.
Sure.
It's something similar like that, but more psychically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but things, in unfoldment, things really can start popping. Just event.
I really didn't believe you when you said that about a year ago. I was just laughing my head off. No, really. I just, and I still don't believe it in a way, but the evidence is becoming clearer.
But you also have mentioned that your karma starts to kind of like, it just kind of starts to balance or get smoother. And
it gets smoother in the sense that
there's a balance.
In the sense that it becomes less and less relevant, less and less important. It doesn't necessarily get smoother in the sense that it straightens itself out, although it may. But the main thing, the important thing, is that it becomes less important, because what energizes entrapment and karma is a sense of importance. It matters what happens. It matters what the outcome is. And as that gets less and less and falls away, then by its very nature, that's straightening out. Whether or not what it looks like is actually straightening out or not.
Yeah, I think I've noticed more of a harmony in my karma, some
Sure.
of my karmic
Yeah.
energy events
Yeah.
that are going on.
But it can be kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because as things seem less urgent and less important, you're feeding them with less sort of emotionality, which will have a natural tendency to relax it and to straighten it out anyway, just in itself.
Yeah.
If you're uptight and urgent and freaked out about things, that will tend to make you dealing with those things uptight and urgent and freaked out, which will tend to generate more of the same in terms of other people and circumstances you're dealing with, as opposed to if you're relaxed, if you're loose, if you're flexible, then that again tends to resonate and force more of the same in the circumstance. And the natural tendency, as you begin to really settle into the fact that your interpretations aren't real, is the emotionality and reactivity based on those interpretations just gets very ghostly. It gets much less intense, there's much less urgency. And so naturally, with circumstances, you have a relaxedness and more of an ease, more of a sense of who cares kind of thing. Laissez-faire.
Yeah, and that kind of happens on its own.
That's all. Yeah, it all happens on its own. I mean, all that it's not like I have to do this and I have to do that. It's just all you have to do is notice, and everything happens on its own. And noticing is nothing other than noticing what this is. Notice, be here now. Notice your experience as it actually is. That's all. And all of that straightening out, it spontaneously does itself. All that unfoldment spontaneously does itself. All the liberating spontaneously does itself. Just from seeing what this is. To any degree, see what this is just a little bit once in a while. That's great.
So, Peter, the dialogue that goes on, is that interpretation? Is that thought?
You mean dialoguing? With dialoguing in?
Now I'm more aware of the dialogue that goes on.
You mean like internal dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, something is seeing all of this.
Yeah, it's basically this thought. It's interpretation.
It feels like a dialogue.
Uh-huh.
But there must be something else there, because the seer has to be there to be seen, or to be...
Well, you don't need to, that's too much analysis. You don't need to analyze it. It's basically just it's narration. It's describing. It's, what am I doing? But it's as if there was someone you're talking to, but it's not really anyone you're talking to. But it's not important in itself. Again, and it's not anything you need to not do. But notice that, when you can do noticing on that, and notice that again, it's just a spontaneous energy event, and isn't connected to anything other than the fact that it's the nature of the mind to be active, like it's the nature of clouds to move through the sky. So there's an intrinsic dynamism, there's an intrinsic, activity where things are happening. It's always doing stuff. And what the mind does is it looks at things, it thinks, it analyzes, it focuses on things. And that's fine, but it's nothing other than spontaneous energy events in the dimension of mentality, as opposed to being about anything or having any meaning or having any importance in terms of what the interpretations claim to be about. Yeah. And again, it's fine, it doesn't need to stop, it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, it sure doesn't stop.
Yeah, and that doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Just get worried if you get older, like me, you start talking out loud. I think it's really bizarre.
Even that doesn't matter. You might get locked up, but that doesn't matter either. So.
No.
That could be a good thing, get 3 square meals.
Sleep.
Yeah, sleep.
Yeah, it just shows it for what it is. It is sort of this spontaneous.
Yeah, sure.
Just happening. It's just constant.
Yeah. Experience is very eventful. Every dimension of experience is full of dynamism, full of information, The field of vision is full of all this light and all these colors and shapes and textures. The field of sound, the field of feeling, the fields of thought, other fields of supplementation, and so on and so on and so on. It's all full and it's all moving. It's all constantly bubbling and sizzling and simmering. Because that's the nature of the energy. It's intrinsically dynamic, and but it's not about anything other than that it is that. It's like the sun. The sun is not about anything. The sun doesn't shine for a purpose. It shines because what it is a shining. And the mind thinks because what it is a thinking. It's not about anything. It's just that fundamental primal fact of it radiating in its milieu, in its dimension, which looks like what we call thought. Just like the radiating in the milieu of light looks like what we call vision, and so on and so forth. But it's that primal fundamental energy event that's the whole story. That's the start of it, but that's also the finish of it. That's as far as it goes. It doesn't mean anything or imply anything or lead to anything. It's just the actual primal fact is the whole thing. That's why I call it radiant presence, because it's intrinsically radiant in the sense that it's always, doing its thing. It's always dynamic. It's always putting out, putting forth, shining. And its presence, because that's its one characteristic, is it's here. It is actual. It is actually present. And that's comprehensive. That's your entire experience. That's the entire universe. It's the entirety of reality. It's nothing other than this radiant presence. And it looks infinitely diversified and subtle, and infinite range of qualities and textures and so on that are just seeming apparently here in this presence, in this radiance. But that's its nature, that it should be so. And you go to sleep, same thing. Have a dream, same thing. Wake up, same thing. Always the same condition. Drop dead, same thing. Get born, same thing.
That dynamism, or it's like in terms of the internal, dialogue, which is just constant, as you said. It's just happening so fast, and so actually coming to a concept or a thought, or in the terms of vision, sort of focusing on some object, is it's sort of a letdown or something. I mean, because
it's a vast oversimplification.
It's oversimplification.
Because the radiance.
But I was talking about the emotion,
Yeah.
sort of even the emotional part of it.
Totally.
But there's sort of a letdown. If you notice that's what's happening, because there's just so much else going on.
Yeah,
And
it's
you're not
so.
noticing it,
It's,
obviously, if you're focusing on that.
Yeah, it's literally infinitely information dense. The information density is literally infinite. That's way beyond a lot.
Yeah.
That's way beyond a whole lot. That's way beyond too much.
Billions and billions. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But even that focusing in those and getting fixated on a
That's it too.
emotion or thought, that happens in the speed of a light too.
Yeah, that's it too. It's doing that. And then when it does that, it doesn't depart from itself. It doesn't get less infinite
No.
when it focuses in. It doesn't get less infinite when it dumbs itself down. It never departs from itself. It never stops being anything other than naked, radiant presence. And it can look like anything. Absolutely anything. But it never departs from itself. It's always exactly this astounding light show.
I guess I might maybe sort of this letdown I'm talking about is very, it's itself very subtle.
Uh-huh.
But that it's sort of leaving itself just for the, or
Well, it pretends to.
or it's pretending that it's.
And that's what ignorance consists of, is not noticing this astounding, this literally miraculous infinity, and taking it as pedestrian or dull or normal or somehow small or limited or separated or something. And it can do that effortlessly. But even when it does that, it doesn't depart from itself. It still is that. And even in that, if you notice what it is, you will find this radiant presence, because it never departs from that. It's not like it leaves the infinity and goes to an actual smallness.
Right.
It effectively creates a sort of a feeling tone of smallness, but the building blocks it's using to do it is infinite radiant presence. So it doesn't do a very convincing job. It doesn't hold up to examination.
Right.
It's like a really bad counterfeit bill. If you look at it closely, it's really obvious. And likewise, when you look, if you're having a dull, boring, normal, limited, ignorant experience, it doesn't stand up to examination. Just look at what it's made of. Look at what is actually present, and the jig is up. It's like, hey, oh, by the way, this is astounding, miraculous infinity that this normalcy is made of. How does that work?
Right. But that's sort of how I when you're talking about liberation, is that being liberated from the bullshit or untrue.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. You're liberated from any limitation whatsoever, because limitation is a claim that doesn't exist, because the building blocks that claim is made of are unlimited. And you can't build limitation out of unlimitedness. You can't take unlimitedness and stack it up and expect to end up with limitation. It just can't be done.
Does limitation, would it be valid to say that it's getting stuck in one of the subsystems?
Yeah, it's an implication of a subsystem, but of course the subsystems are made of the metasystem, so again, it's all innuendo, and again, it doesn't stand up to examination. The subsystems look like they're autonomous, and look like they're internally consistent, but they aren't.
Yeah.
because they're subsystems of the metasystems, of the metasystems doing them. So of course they're made of the metasystem. They just look like as if they were subsystems and autonomous and doing themselves in little, but they aren't really.
Yeah, because I can see the vastness of all of this going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it is literally data intensive, and
Yeah.
there is always newness. But
Yeah.
then I see myself getting limited or stuck in one of the subsystems that's going on. It's not that I know that is part of the bigger system, but
Uh-huh.
it's just that, I'm kind of stuck in this little corner,
Mm-hmm.
and then at some point I get out of it, but still,
Yeah.
there's a stuckness there sometimes.
Mhm. Sure.
And so that seems to be what, I would be noticing and,
Sure.
transition out of that.
Sure. And that's the mechanism. It's like TV. Say you're in an airport or something and there's a TV monitor on, and you're looking at it and it's just some insipid comedy or whatever. You know it's bullshit and you know it's TV, but you're watching it all the time. You just get sucked into it.
Yeah.
It's like it's
Right.
you can easily find yourself accepting the parameters that it's claiming as actuality as if they were true.
Yeah.
Or when you go to a movie, same thing.
Yeah. And
You know it's a movie, but
Yeah.
but still, you get you're just gone. And then what the movie is claiming is happening is almost actually happening for you, and you react to it as if it was actually happening. Consciousness can do that, but even when it does that, it's still virtual. It's still not actual. It's all innuendo.
Yeah, because it's what everybody else is doing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like a herd mentality where everybody's kind of stuck.
Well,
in
that's the
stuff.
challenge in this day and age, because we live in more or less of a spiritual dark age, is that you're constantly being bombarded with semantic bullshit that is telling you very, very adamantly with powerful brainwashing techniques, oh, no, you're a little human being, you're in this big world, your life sucks, it's always going to suck, you have no hope, you're screwed, spend money, vote Republican, whatever, and it's all lies, it's all innuendo, but you're bombarded with it very heavy-handedly and not given much counter information, because again it's a dark age, so you can't expect there to be a lot of accurate information. There just isn't much. You won't encounter clarity, accurate clarity, very often in the sort of the bandwidth of human communication. Because most everyone, by and large, I mean, numerically or statistically, 99.99999 whatever percent of the people are completely bonkers.
Yeah, definitely.
Is this really a spiritual wasteland? Dark age, whatever it was you think?
I don't know if it really is. It seems like it is.
The internet helps in some ways. Like, there's all kinds of crap in there, but at least you can find things. You're not limited to your little valley and whoever happens to live like there.
Real information is out there, but
Yeah.
clear information is out there. But what percentage, if you weigh it against the totality of the field of information, what percentage of it is there? It's infinitesimal.
Yeah.
It's a needle in a haystack. It's a needle in a field of haystacks.
Yeah. Do you think there's been a better time?
I have no idea.
It seems like all times are spiritual dark age.
Maybe so. But it's irrelevant, because the point is that this is the mechanism. In practical terms, this is the mechanism that individually, the individual has to find their way to genuineness, and you always move from confusion to genuineness. And that's going to be the case regardless of the apparent quantity of the ratio of confusion versus good information that is out there. You still have to develop the wherewithal to recognize it. even if it was 90% clear information and 10% confusion, you still would have to develop the clarity to be able to differentiate. And that's just karma or luck or maturity or whatever you want to call it. You know, how's that happen? God knows. When it's time, it happens.
This is off topic, but I don't know why it's interesting to me right now. People have always made up religions and ideas about the way things are. And it seems simple to think that radiance creates nature, but when it comes down to people and their ideas about the past and the present and the future and where they came from and all these other stories, and that's what people make up stories in religion about us. You know, somehow we're special and we can see what's going on, and we have part of God in us, and that's why. And, you know, the dog doesn't have that. And so, when you talk about radiance, it's easier for me to imagine. Okay, the sun is happening like this, but when I look at my own little stories, it's much more tricky because there's, I don't know, it seems different. Does that make sense?
Well, I hear what you're saying, but you know the way in which it seems different. If you look closely, you'll discover it's the same. Because where does your thought come from? I mean,
I feel that.
Suppose it comes from your life force or your body.
Yeah, I feel
Where's
that.
your body come from? Where's your life force come from?
I get all that. But, now I lost my thought. I have it right there. But, why would this creation, why would it, I understand why it would do the sun.
Right.
I would do the sun if I had a choice.
Oh, so why does it do all this confusion?
This crap.
Because it's not crap to it. It's just harmonics. You know, it's like asking why does the ocean have waves, and why do the waves have foam? You know, and why does the foam? You know, I mean, it's just harmonics. It's just a system that is generating so much information on so many bandwidths that it's like moire patterns. You know what moire patterns are?
No.
Like the curtains. If you have like two sheer curtains that are overlapping each other, they'll make all of these elaborate, apparent geometrical sort of patterns. Just due to the synchronicity of where the way the lights block.
I'm not arguing with you, I'm just like, it's just something I keep thinking. So, if I go in the bottom of the ocean or in the ocean and I see all these wonderful creatures, there's no illusion there. There's no, like, there's not, you don't go to a seahorse and it thinks it's something other than a seahorse.
Oh yeah, but
we're like
humans. There's no illusion about humans. Humans are humans. Humans are these energy forms, and part of what these energy forms do is generate all these fantastic elaborations in their consciousness, and that's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing, it's an astounding display. You know, it's
but
like
then we have to go through this elaborate journey of figuring out that it's all lies.
yeah, but that's like a chicken pecking its way out of an egg. You know, it's like why is it part of the life cycle of or a caterpillar becoming a butterfly? Why is it part of the life cycle of this creature that it has to climb up and essentially, weld itself into a tomb and die and change into some other creature and come out again? You know, God, seems like an awful lot of work. I mean, why is it inflicted on the poor creature that it should have to do that? That's just how the energy system happens to be. You know, I mean, you can think of it in terms of something as simplistic as Darwinian evolution or something. But humans are this life form, and one of the cardinal aspects of our functioning is this astounding mentality that we have. You know, it's like our brains. We have these big ass brains that are just on 10 all the time, turning out all of this buzzing. You know, and that's just a fact in the case. And because it's the fact, it's a challenge for us to sort through our own noise. We make so much noise. I mean, just looking at it mechanistically and calling it in terms of the brain and so on, we make so much noise that it's our personal challenge to sort through it and discover it's just noise.
Okay, that's fair.
It seems like there's a spectrum too. I was watching a show about baboons, and it was showing how they get depressed. Like they weren't getting the girls, like the ones who weren't the strongest. And they would sit there and have weird behaviors, like picking at themselves in kind of a violent way and stuff.
Yeah.
Like
See,
they
if
thought they should have the girls.
Yeah, see if they had internet porn, then that's what they'd be doing instead of pulling on their own.
So I guess then there's the beginning of what we're stuck with. You could see it in our relatives there.
Yeah.
The beginning of neurosis.
Yeah.
Well, all life forms are like that. All life forms, the biggest challenge for any life form is its own nature. Because you're saddled with being what you happen to be. And so that's your own personal challenge. I mean, as a life form, if you were a butterfly or a slug or a bacterium, it would be the same thing.
Also, the radiance doesn't have any choices. I mean, it doesn't make choices.
No, it's unending. It's inconceivably bountiful generation of implications, of just harmonics and patterns within patterns and patterns within patterns. And we call these aspects of patterns life forms or universes or galaxies or quarks or whatever, but it's all just this astounding patterning in this amazing transcendental energy. And it sees no problem with that because it knows it never doesn't lose anything by that process. It's just its nature to do so, to be that. And when we discover that nature is our nature, then we also discover that there's no problem, and that's what liberation consists of. Humans have no problem. Our problem is that we think we have problems, but it's all a misunderstanding. So all this is really about coming to see what we really are and discover that we have no problems. Because we are just this astounding energy system that's doing itself, and that is it's not lacking anything. It's just doing itself, and it's going to continue to do itself forever, and that's what it is. And it's self-sufficient. There's no lack. There's nothing missing. There's nothing wrong. We think there's something wrong or something missing because we misunderstand it. We think we're a separate being, and we think we have limitations, and we think, God, wouldn't it be nice if I was as good-looking as Brad Pitt and as smart as Stephen Hawking, and as rich as, whoever, Bill Gates, whatever. Well, maybe, it'd be fun, but, But that's not the problem. The problem is that I think that, and I believe those thoughts. Whereas if I just see, oh wow, here's this astounding, inconceivable energy pattern doing itself, unendingly with no implications and no contrary, no impediment.
So we can think that we're human, but not believe that we're human.
Yeah, you can think anything you want. Just see that those thoughts are hypothetical, partial interpretations. All thoughts are fine, but they're all thoughts are, at best, partial, hypothetical interpretations. Maybe I'm a human being. Maybe I'm a separate being. Maybe I live in a world which is separate than me. Maybe this, maybe that. That's all fine. That's just philosophy. But if I start believing that's true, then all of a sudden I might feel trapped in that condition and not realize that I had generated it as a fantasy.
Or it had generated it as a fantasy.
Yeah.
So really noticing is just putting everything in, as it were, a perspective or some actual perspective.
Well, it's actually, or I would say possibly a little more accurately, it's taking things out of any perspective.
Okay.
Perspectives are generated by worldviews, by interpretations. In actuality, there's no perspective, which is the true perspective. I think it's break time. Should we have a little break?
Yes.
We'll be back shortly, online people.
maybe this is too much analysis, but it sounds like you're saying everything that exists, or at least everything that's alive, part of that, the nature of that life is having a challenge. There's no challenge. Nothing is just kind of static and enjoying itself.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. It looks like that in some respects. What I would put it is the energy generates its own apparent dissonance, or you could say turbulence. And that applies to, differentiating between animate and inanimate is completely arbitrary. But the energy generates its own turbulence, which can look like challenges. It can look like challenges. It can look like all these sorts of things. It can look like disharmony. It can look like resistance. It can look like dysfunctionality. But it's just it's like a complex energy form that works against itself to various degrees.
And is it possible to understand that and simultaneously understand that things are just have no continuity?
Absolutely. You can know it very intimately. You can know that it is like that, and you can know that even when it is turbulent and apparently working against itself, it still is itself. So what's doing the working against and what's doing the countering that are one and the same, so there's not an actual contest there.
But I was talking more about the continuity of it. Everything's just
that's what I mean.
all the time.
Yeah, no, you can know the continuity, because the continuity is not a continuity of form, the continuity is a continuity of content, and that the energy is always exactly itself and never departs from itself. That's the continuity. Like, for example, the continuity of dream is the dreaming, and what it looks like is absolutely discontinuous and never repeats and doesn't make any sense. It's totally incoherent.
But the content is always the same.
But the substance of it, the event is it's always dream, and that's where it gets continuity, where it gets identity. The radiance is always radiant. It never departs from that, even when it generates conceivably turbulent fractal energy forms.
So maybe we see that sameness and we misinterpret it as continuity, as existing through time.
Oh yeah, sure.
We sense that there's
Oh yeah, everything we sense is based on true intuitions, but they're inaccurate. In terms of the context we tend to put them in, because the way it actually is inconceivable.
And at least that maybe would explain why we are so convinced that things persist through time. We sense something there's a sameness.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. There is a sameness.
But it's not what we think. It's not the same as we think it is. It's not the sameness of persistence. It's the sameness of the basic material.
Yeah, sameness of identity. It is itself. It never departs from itself. You are you. You never depart from you, even though what that looks like is always different and has an infinite range. No, these things are not abstractions. They are knowable very concretely and very immediately in experience. The radiance is not an abstract or philosophical notion. It's a physical. It's a let's say an experiential fact. It's the experiential fact.
People like to talk about, there's been something that's always been the same in you since you were born, right? People say that. But that must be what they're trying to describe.
Yeah. What this is a sameness. But on the other hand, if you go looking for exactly what that is, you'll be dumbfounded because you won't find it. So there's a certainty that it is so, but it can't be found. It can't be defined. It can't be arrived at, even as it is self-evident.
Do you think time, the concept of time and duration, is a learned response, or is it an inherent one?
I think a little of both. I think it's inherent, but I think a lot of the specific interpretations, in other words, I think it's possible to learn a lot of different interpretations and understandings and even senses of time if you're sophisticated. But I think that the basis of that is inherent, the basis of a sense of timeliness, because I mean, the sense of time is based upon the fact that there's apparent change. You know, the fact that there's newness constantly in evidence. And how could there be newness unless there was a previous otherness? You know, and so that paradox is addressed by our consciousness. Our consciousness wraps its ideas around that by supposing that the otherness is actual and previous, and sort of pushes it away into the past, and then so there's newness. So the old, that means there's oldness, which must be then, and newness is now.
Well, then perhaps there's something different between change and time. Things change.
Yeah, I don't think there is any time. I think just the only fact is change.
That's my whole point. Is that how did we all come up with this concept of time when self-evidently there is no such thing as time? There is only now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an oversimplification. I think it's a way of explaining. You know, it's like a fairy tale. It's a simplified story that sort of seems to incorporate everything if you don't look too closely.
Well, it's a bit like the body, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, same, exactly the
it's hard
same.
to say what anyone else's concept of time
Yeah.
the body is anyway.
Sure.
In physics, there's the notion of time and equations, and I always think that was an actual thing, but it seems like it's something that makes the equations make sense or work.
Yeah, in physics, time is always related to change too.
Yeah.
And to causality. You know, you can have fast, if you can demonstrate very subtle kinds of causality, you can have very subtle kinds of time, and even reverse time, and so on and so forth. So but again, it's basically an abstract notion. It's a notion that is conceived and generated abstractly and put into equations.
Right.
It's based on movement, motion.
Well, it's change. Change is the fundamental fact, and then motion is a way of seeing change.
Something, in order to change, it has to move.
Yeah.
An image that comes to my mind, when I think about sometimes is a leopard on a limb. It's a violent thing. And a deer is running along underneath, and the leopard will lead the deer, to land on it. He has some sense of rate of change. Mm-hmm. And we must have some, and I can remember plenty of it. I can remember so often, I can tell whether my right foot or my left foot is going to hit a line way up ahead. Mm-hmm. I can't really calculate that, if I were to try to.
You would have made a good leopard.
Well, we used to play jumping games. You run and you hit a target.
Yeah.
You have to know where your foot is going to hit, but you learn it.
Sure. Yeah.
There's there's rate of change.
Yeah. All that.
And it's instinctive. I was thinking earlier when you were talking about whatever it was, I'm very challenged in regard to dance. I mean, I watch, whether it's modern dance or whether it's ballet or anything, I wonder why are they doing that?
Somehow.
Yes, give that.
Don't possess them.
Yeah, don't possess them.
It's a serious question.
I'm afraid when you let the Y word enter the discourse, you go to the can of worms.
I mean, why is it choreographed that way? And I was almost getting a little hint of that in the earlier discourse before the break. That's the nature is just doing things spontaneously, and maybe dance is sort of not actually telling us something in terms of meaning, but telling us something in terms of this is how life is. It's spontaneous. The movement is free and spontaneous, and there you go.
And everything is that. Everything is similar to that. Everything is a dancing of the life force in terms of human functioning. Thought is like that. Communication is like that. All motion is like that. Really.
Seems like in a sense I should go back and look at dances again, because it seems like that maybe is really telling us about the way nature unfolds.
Sure. But you don't. But it doesn't matter where you look. You don't need to look at dance. Dance will do that, but anything will do that. But it gets back. The most primal way to look at it is to look at radiance. Radiance always unfolds the way that it does. And what that is and how that is most clearly found in the thing itself. Radiance generates apparent patterning, and the patternings have, all the sorts of aspects that we can analyze and think about. But it can be a digression to get caught up in the ways radiance works. The more important thing is to see that everything is radiance, and then you find liberation. And having found that, then you can use your leisure in other pastimes that are less demanding, such as this kind of exploring the different aspects of radiance. But from the point of view of solving confusion, of solving delusion, of realizing what this is and of discovering liberation, the prime fact is that everything is radiance, and radiance is doing itself.
The state of realization, it's radiance doing itself.
Yeah, the state of realization is exactly that. And that is the fundamental fact, so that the state of realization is this condition. Noticing that that's the case, or recognizing that's the case, constitutes individual realization, or enlightenment, which happens to be liberating in the sense that you are liberated from the delusion, from the suffering causing and confusion causing delusions of misinterpretation that you may previously have been subject to.
There's a kind of a mind fuck in there, because it's experience either way that's arising.
Yeah, but because experience is always what it is, but experience is amenable to misinterpreting itself. And when experience stops misinterpreting itself, that's realization. It doesn't change. After realization, it's the same thing it was before realization, but it's not misinterpreting itself.
Right. That's why you've also said realization is retroactive.
It's retroactive in the sense that when you discover what this is, you discover it has always been what it is, and you also discover that you have always known what it is.
Yeah.
So it's, which is discovered when you discover it, you will see the truth of that. But if you can't say how that works in advance. You can't explain it. Oh, I can't.
Yeah, that's a bit of a conundrum.
It's a conundrum. It's a paradox, but it's true.
But it's true.
When you see what this is, you will see that it is what it has always been, and you will also see that you've always known exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And so how the non-recognition works is very elusive and strange.
That sounds right, even without understanding it.
Yeah.
But
There's a question I had earlier when you were on that subject, that are there two knowers? Because there's one knower that knows all the time what's what, and there's another knower that's just spinning around deluded. What sort of relationship is there?
There's no knower. First of all, there's not so far from the brain two knowers. There's no knower. but aside from that, it's a matter of there being an interpreter or not. It's not a matter of a knower. It's a matter of there being an interpreter, which is not an entity that is doing interpretation. An interpreter is the interpretation itself. And when interpretation ceases, confusion ceases. Because confusion is nothing other than interpretation. And all interpretation is misinterpretation. And when interpretation stops, the only thing left is the fact itself, which of course is perfectly clear, because it is what it is. And since there's no knower, the fact that it is what it is includes the completeness of that fact. In other words, that it is what it is, it doesn't need to be known, because there's actually no knower. This whole fiction of knowing and there being a knower is just another aspect of interpretation and confusion. That's why I call it presence. It's not presence, it's not knowing, it's presence. And the logical implication is, well, presence has to be present to something or someone. And I say, says who? Why can't there just be presence? Miraculous. It's not to anything, it's just presence. How is it there? I don't know. Doesn't need a how, it just is. And in the face of presence as it is, it's quite clear that there doesn't need to be a knower, and it's also quite clear that there is no knower.
And there is no how.
Yeah, no how. No how, no why.
Well, there's something, well, I guess that's another interpreting. There's interpreting that arises.
There is interpreting that arises.
Constantly.
Sure.
And there's awareness of that happening.
Yes.
And that awareness of it is probably another interpreting of the interpreting.
Yeah. There's not really awareness of it, there's just present. The interpreting is present.
Well, there's a recognition that interpreting is happening.
Right, which is an elaborate way of saying it's present.
That it's
presence is obvious. Presence is obvious because it's present. So if there's interpreting that's present, then it's obvious that the interpreting is present, because presence is obviousness. Presence is actuality.
So it doesn't matter. Well,
you
said when the interpretation stops, then there's just presence.
Right.
So it seems.
But let me qualify that. It's not necessarily that interpretation stops. Yeah. Interpretation is seen to not apply to anything, to not be accurate. That's probably a clearer way, a more accurate way of saying it.
Does it actually not come up as much once it's seen through?
It actually tends to not come up quite as much, or not in the same way, but it doesn't actually stop at all. And not necessarily even not as much. But it's transformed in character because it's realized to be an energy in its own right that has nothing to do with anything. I mean, there may be some degrees of cross-correlation, but not necessarily, like there is between other dimensions of experience. Like there may be some cross-correlation between vision and hearing, but not necessarily. So you might hear a sound that has no visual corollary, or you might hear a sound that has a visual corollary. So, that has a visual. That's a sound and a visual corollary. And the traffic down there is a sound with no visual corollary, or whatever. And there can be sounds with touch corollaries, like body function type sounds that have no visual corollary. In other words, there's coincidence. There's coincidence in exactly. There's coincidence in two dimensions, and not in other dimensions of experience. And so in terms of interpretation or in terms of conceptualization, it's the same sort of thing. There may occasionally be some degree of correlation between what is thought and what is occurring in some dimension of experience, but does not. But that doesn't mean that it captures it. It's a weak correlation rather than a strong correlation of interpretation, of accurate interpretation.
Yeah, there's less energy in it, and when it disappears or dissolves or passes, it's almost like it leaves no residue.
Yeah, no residue. It's not believed. It's just its own. It's like a hypothesis. It's like having narrated, like always talking in the back of your mind and saying, maybe this is such and such. Maybe this is such and such. I wonder if this is such and such. I wonder if this is such and such. Rather than this is such and such. This is such and such. And so it's a different way of. It's not a different event so much as it's a different way of holding it. We're essentially, when we're believing interpretation, we're crazy people. We're believing the voices in our head are true. When we're free of interpretation, there's still voices in our head, but we know that there's voices in our head, and they may have things to say that are moderately interesting to some degree, but there's still just voices in our head, and we know that we're crazy, but we're not so crazy that we don't know we're crazy.
Is there some kind of energetic event where belief gets severed, and then
I don't know. I wouldn't know if I qualify as an energetic event. I don't know how that works, but it can happen.
But it's not a matter of understanding something or reading something.
It's a matter
just
of
a thing
seeing.
happens.
It's a seeing. It's an acknowledging of direct experience.
Oh, that's energy.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it has to be energy because that's all that there is. But what it is and how it works, I'm not really certain about.
It's something you can stumble upon, or you could make more likely to happen by
It's
being
knowable.
open to.
It's knowable, and it's knowable. It's arguably knowable by playing with it, by looking at it, by questioning it, by considering the possibility that it may be so, and all these other things. But I don't know if that's sufficient to do the trick or not. I mean, because it's all guesswork. Since what happens when that happens is ultimately mysterious, ways of supposedly supporting that are ultimately mysterious too. So basically, your guess is as good as mine. It makes sense that that's the case, but maybe not.
So it's like maybe an accident. Maybe you make yourself more accident prone, or maybe
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, in many spiritual traditions, some of which are the most clear that are currently known, it's considered to be grace, which is kind of begging the question, because what exactly does that mean?
Yeah,
Right.
but that kind of captures the sense of it. In other words, good luck. Have some grace.
Yeah. Thanks.
That was it.
Well, this is it.
Sprinkled some grace.
It's very subtle and paradoxical, because the radiance is grace. The radiance is its own grace, intrinsically. So noticing the radiance is encountering grace, because the radiance is literally miraculous divine presence.
Yeah.
It's not inert. It's supremely intelligent. It's a hyperdimensional qualitative richness that is alive, that is intelligent, it includes all qualities whatsoever. So it's very strange stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's no surprise that engaging it more directly by what I call noticing will tend to have kind of a random effects,
Yeah.
some of which might be realization.
Right. There's also a sort of faith or something building, like with your, like the Dzogchen story of the bird leaves his ship and has to come back, so there's nowhere else to land.
Yeah.
Like sort of a feeling, like the thing you're just saying right now, that this is what it's made of. So
Yeah.
you have to
And
eventually.
you discover, well, you notice that. This is part and parcel of noticing. You notice, after a while, you notice, well, all the stuff I've been doing, where has it gotten me?
Yeah.
Here. Isn't this kind of where I've always been?
Yeah.
And then you kind of get, oh, maybe it's not in all the histrionics and all the questing and all the going far afield. Maybe it's right here. You know?
Yeah.
Well, that's the trick. That's why it's important to associate it with somebody or someone who somehow has been led to recognize what we always experience, but we just have superimposed it with a lot of labeling and a lot of misdirection. But as soon as you see it, you don't. It's unmistakable,
Yeah.
and it's only a matter of not recognizing it more than anything. Just not
Yeah,
lack
it's
of
all-
recognition,
It's
recognizing.
all
re-knowing
about.
what
It's
you
all
already
about.
know.
It's all about recognizing.
Right.
It's the whole name of the game.
The way that I understand grace and luck is grace is this, all of this that's happening, and then luck, the way I have understood luck is that noticing and appreciating grace, or this.
Which is itself grace.
Right. So luck is appreciating or noticing grace. Is that any comments?
I don't know.
Okay.
Who knows?
But
You're lucky to have grace, and,
I would be
and if you
lucky
have
to
grace, you're
appreciate-
lucky.
I appreciate. I'm lucky if I appreciate grace,
Yeah,
and I can notice this.
yeah. But you know, arguably appreciating grace is a grace itself of grace.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's right.
it's slippery.
in terms of recognizing what's always been here all along, it's the recognition of something in particular about what has always been here all along. Since it's so obvious, since it's so here and it's always been here, there's something that isn't recognized all the time.
Yeah.
So then there's a recognition of.
Well, it's a recognition, I would say, of no other than of something in particular, of everything in particular, of all the particular, because non-recognition consists of censorship, consists of only noticing some of the particulars, I would say. So, in other words, let's suppose there's an infinity of qualities present, and let's suppose you're letting yourself notice 1,000 of them. So that's infinity minus 1,000 that you're not letting yourself notice. Whereas recognition is all of a sudden being with the full infinity of them. So it's a removal of censorship.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of a funny hypnotic censorship, because it's not like all the qualities aren't always here. It's more like you're somehow not letting yourself see them, even though you are seeing them. It's kind of like someone that's been hypnotized by a stage hypnotist to, you're not going to be able to see anyone with blonde hair. And there's 10 people on the stage and 2 of them have blonde hair, and you think there's 8 people on the stage. How does that work? I don't know. But it's very analogous to what non-realization consists of, even in the face of the actual presence of the naked display of all full information. Somehow you don't let yourself see all of it, even though you are seeing it. It's this very strange phenomenon.
And also, infinity minus 1,000 is still infinity.
But that's kind of the joke. Yeah, and, the way all of that works is very, very slippery. But rather than looking at it theoretically, I recommend looking at it practically, which is, notice the actuality of presence, and you will tend to notice that there's more there than you're used to letting yourself see. And just that one fact, it's not like you need to tear down the wall and see everything all at once, but just that there is more. Just that, wow, I'm looking at this and I'm used to seeing it in various ways, but there's just more there. Just that alone is enormously powerful. And that alone will lead to your realization. Because in that moreness is the very essence of what this is. This is more than itself, which sounds very strange and paradoxical, but it's true. And that's one of its cardinal qualities. And when I say infinite, I mean that in literal sense. I don't mean that in some figurative or metaphorical sense of hyperbole. It's literally infinite. And the quality of infinity is being more than itself. That's its prime quality. So the qualities that are present is more than the qualities that are present. Right here, right now. That's literally true. And just seeing that and that's a mind fuck. There's no way you can make any sense of that. But again, it happens to be the case. And seeing that that is true is the discovery of what this is. That this is more than itself. That however much you see here, there's always more another. It's like discovering bottomlessness. Discover that you could add up every quality present in your experience, and there would be more. And you'd say, okay, there's more, so I add those in, and there's more. So I add those in, and there's more. Forever. But not like by having to go way out there. Right here. Up close, there's more. The moreness is not a more of distance. The moreness is a more of inconceivability. So right here, everything that's really close and present just in your immediate field of experience in this room is more than itself. It's hyperspatial. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. It's mind-blowing. It's completely irrational. It's totally nuts, but it's literally true. And seeing that, seeing how little sense this actually makes is of the essence of discovering what this is. This makes absolutely no sense. It's completely dizzying what this is. And we're used to seeing it in a way that makes some degree of sense, and that's what ignorance looks like. When you think this kind of makes sense, or is kind of rational, or you can kind of get a handle on it, that's completely wrong. That's entirely incorrect, entirely inaccurate. And when you get that, oh my God, what's happening here is mind-blowing, that's beginning to notice. That's beginning to notice how weird and inconceivable this is. This is the concrete, literal, actual presence of infinity. Pure and simple. And again, without hyperbole, I just mean that it's the simple statement of fact. And that's what realization looks like. It's realizing the immediate, concrete actuality of that fact. You got that, oh, wow. Is it right here? Wow. Wow. And your days of boredom will be gone forever. You'll be able to sit in the doctor's waiting room for 4 hours without a magazine with a shit-eating grin on your face.
Peter, I find it interesting that that we, or that speaking for my own self, that I tune in and I tune out, and it's just it's an effortless transaction. I mean, I'm not doing anything when I'm tuning in, and I'm not doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be any effort to do any of this, but yet it's going on.
Yeah. That's a spontaneous aspect of what the process of unfoldment looks like at various phases. You know, and again, that's you know, you'll find that almost universally reported among people that go through this, that for long periods or for various periods of it, it looks very much like that, which is this kind of seesaw effect of moving back and forth. But, you know, again, it doesn't make any sense, but it's an aspect of what this seems to need to go through in the process of realizing itself. So, in itself, that is good news, because it means that's a symptom of the process of realization. And it's easy to take that as a challenge or as a failing of like, oh, I'm losing it, I keep falling out of it or something. But it's not like that. This is a natural aspect of the process, and it doesn't need to find completion until it does.
I don't know, somehow it feels better tuning in
Sure.
than it does tuning out.
Sure.
I mean, and maybe not feeling better, but maybe a balance and the harmony of
Yeah, I understand.
everything, all the noise that's out there.
Sure. Yeah. It's more luscious.
Yeah.
But again, the process of coming to that as a permanent realization looks like coming to it intermittently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. the sky gazing is really interesting.
Have you been doing that?
Yeah,
Good. It's subtle.
It what?
It's subtle because at first it seems like an effect and all that, and you don't really notice necessarily that anything's really happening of any power. But after a while, there's something that happens. It has a subliminal kind of an effect.
Yeah, it really does, and it's very rich.
Yeah.
There's this rich, feeling tone that I keep trying to conceptualize it, and I can't. But I mean, just being able to.
Yeah, it's a really good technique for discovering nonlinear dimensionality.
Yeah, that must be how the energy is just kind of swirling around, right?
Yeah.
Same type of thing.
Yeah.
Is it the primal energy, or?
Well, there's nothing but the primal energy, but yeah, sure, yeah, and we're used to seeing the energy in terms of various patterns.
Yeah.
Which is what limitation is. But when we do something as referenceless as that kind of an experience over a protracted period of time, we learn to be more comfortable with sort of non-linearity and with ambiguity, with it being sort of this way and that way simultaneously and not really being any way. And so the sort of the vagueness of that, but the actual concrete presence of it as a vagueness is a way of shifting gears out of our usual mode of being with it as, oh no, it's this or it's that.
Yeah.
It's basically retraining ourselves because we're usually focusing so much on things in terms of specifics. And in sky gazing, there's just no specifics. There just aren't any.
Yeah.
And so after a while, there's no specifics, but there's experience. And you sort of ease into that mode just spontaneously by direct exposure, rather than by planning it or understanding it or figuring it out or conceiving it. You just sort of come to it by doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because I notice sometimes when I do stargazing, but also I can, like, if I'm driving, I don't. Sometimes I make sure I don't get in accidents, but I will look off for just a split second, just to see if I can, see anything or feel anything. But it's different. So it depends on how engaged I am in the apparition, as to whether I'm able to, feel that richness and.
No, but that's a really good technique. It's an excellent, because it's very obvious. It does itself. It's very obvious. You don't need to understand anything to do it. You just need to have enough persistence to put in enough time that you begin to sort of sink into it.
Yeah, right. It's very easy to do it.
Very
just
easy.
Looking at the sky.
Yeah, you just sit and look at the blank sky and space out.
Yeah.
What could be more fun?
Yeah.
Have a beer at the same time, and you're in hog heaven.
I spent my entire 7th grade doing that.
Yeah. Well, see,
Looking
it
up.
worked.
Yeah, it worked.
Actually, if you space out, you can get distracted.
Yeah, no, that's true. When I say space out, I mean that in a more technical sense than in a colloquial sense.
So Peter, that non-specificity part of it is sort of getting, it's a little bit what I was talking about earlier, and these experience, I don't know if they're experiences, I don't know. I mean, it's just gotten so weird. I just, when I get like that, when I get frustrated, for instance, really trying to get something, my usual default mode is, this is stupid. Mm-hmm. Well, I've been saying that so much, this is stupid, because it's coming so fast, and I don't even know what I'm saying about it coming. I don't even know that. Mm-hmm. It's just I just have this sort of this these. I guess I just try to hold on to it too much, and I'm not moving with it.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
okay.
that's right.
It's self-correcting. It'll teach you how to be with it over time.
But it's, at first it's just, it's not really disturbing because it's fun. I mean, there's so much happening, but that urge to hold on to it, I think, is not right. To come in.
Yeah. And that's typical, when any of these kinds of new phases kick in, we approach them too heavy-handedly. And then, but we get it. No, I lost it. That was wrong. And eventually, we get to how to be with it gently, how to be with it, not how to be with it loosely, loosely and flowingly. Yeah, it is. It actually is. Yeah, you get the really good shots when you don't try too hard.
Even if it is self-correcting, or if it corrects to what you think it should correct to.
Well, I think it's self-correcting in the sense that if you approach it too heavy-handedly or too rigidly, when you get to a certain point, that will become really glaringly obvious,
Yes.
and you either keep doing that and you get frustrated, or you get, wait a minute, I'm fucking up here, and you start playing with alternatives, and you'll stumble on something.
But don't you also tend to reinforce your expectations?
Well, they can do, but again, that's self-correcting because at a certain point that proves to be too heavy-handed.
I think I've seen people get stuck in that loop for many years.
Oh, absolutely. Many lifetimes, probably.
Probably, yes.
When I say self-correcting, I mean ultimately self-correcting.
Okay.
But that's always the case, There's no time, there's no necessary time frame with this. Because anything whatsoever can be a vehicle for getting stuck. And anything whatsoever can be a vehicle for liberation. It's really down to your individual, luck/wit/karma, whatever.
Yeah, and we all do have extensive experience of getting stuck.
Oh yeah, sure, for sure. Yeah. Especially by the time realization comes, you're an expert at getting stuck. Been there, done that. But realization happens in the face of the potential for stuckness. In the face of the possibility of stuckness,
absolutely.
realization can still happen. And when that happens, it shows that organically you have reached the point of subtlety where you can, in fact, avoid those traps. You just got the chops, not by design or deliberately or consciously, but just by a kind of center of gravity or something.
Or by grace.
Well, same thing. Different ways of putting the same thing. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
but grace tends to, for me, it tends to imply that despite yourself.
Well, I think it's always like that, though. I think it's always like that. Because realization does not demand perfection.
No,
It doesn't
it's
even
always
demand.
available.
It doesn't even demand skill.
It's always there.
Yeah, I mean, grace is a really good model of realization. Just sort of that just like it's like winning the lottery or putting the quarter in the $10 million slot and having it come in. It's just like, oh, okay.
Merciful.
As has been said, it's an amazing grace.
Yeah. And look at that, it's quitting time. So good night, online people.